y'all doing out there? Don't I look a sight? Welcome to Morning Read Aloud with me, your host, Elliot. I'm coming to you live from some. Today we continue with another chapter of Albrecht Drue, Ghostpuncher, and I will bring you up to date quickly. We're going to go to verse 6. I think it's chapter 2. He has this arranged in chapters and verses. I don't know exactly why I have the biblical reference. Kind of like it. It's got little intermissions. Interlude, epilogue. Let's see. This is Paul Miller, not that Paul Miller. Chapter 2, The Ghostpuncher begins, and this is verse 6. So, book starts off with our hero, Albrecht Drue, an ex-prize fighter who is hit by a truck after his first and only prize fight, professional fight. He is granted a large settlement after the accident and lives on that money for the last 8 years, basically drinking up a storm and living in squalor in a little town, Bitburg, Massachusetts. It's not so little. Seems like a lively town. After his longtime crush, Charlene, the bartender at his favorite bar, the Cyclops, confesses to him that she's leaving Bitburg and him for her slimy ex-boyfriend, Jake the DJ, and moving to Atlanta, where Albrecht knows that Jake will break her heart again. He's unwilling to talk her out of it. He goes on a bit of a bender. There's a giant riot at the Cyclops when he picks a fight with a couple of bros and beats them all up. So he and Grigsby run out the back door to get away from the cops. He's staggering through Bitburg and he runs across an old wino, who he thinks he's an old wino, a little ragged man lying on the gutter, who he signs over the last of his last check to, and the old guy rewards him by spitting in Drue's eyes, which, as you followers of the fairy world know, is a way that the fairies will grant you the gift of sight and allow you to see the supernatural, which is what I think is going on, but let's find out. As far as Drue knows, he's just been spat in the face by some old wino and he's not happy about it, but let's pick up chapter 6. Verse 6. By the time the cops fought their way through the crowd gathered outside the Cyclops, there wasn't much for them to do. The bar was a bit of a mess, but pretty much everyone involved with the actual fighting had already disappeared. They took a few statements, but not even the yahoos would identify just who it was that started the fight. Grigsby saw to that, making sure they all saw that he had the knife their boy had pulled on Al, leaving no doubt he'd rat them out if they said word one to implicate him or his friend. It might have helped that he didn't hide the a 9mm pistol silhouetted in his inside pocket, but either one likely would have sufficed. To his credit, Dax worked the cops like a champ, finding a fan among them, talking up Ghost Quest. A few promises to put them on the show, a couple of autographs, and a wink in the direction of a homely lady cop sealed the deal, and the finest of the fifth didn't even write the incident up, just told the crew running the joint to shut the doors for the rest of the night. Dax promised to meet them at another bar after their shift, and that was that. That left Charlene and the rest of the staff to clean up the mess, the same way they always had to clean up Al's messes. Cletus offered to help, along with the rest of the ghost geeks, but Charlene shooed them away. She'd have to call the owner, and it wouldn't do to have customers hanging around after she closed. It wouldn't do for her to break down in tears in front of them, especially not in front of that asshole Grigsby. What he didn't understand, what none of them did, was that she hadn't been leading Al on. She never hidden anything from him. He never really tried to make a move on her. She knew how they gossiped and how much the ones who only knew him in passing liked Al and saw her as some kind of witch, playing with his emotions. Most of them had never seen Al the way he was tonight, but she had a few dozen times. Maybe now they'd understand a little better now, how no matter how much she cared about him, she could never be with a guy whose method for dealing with his emotions was to start punching things. On her way out, Lilith broke character and gave Charlene a little hug and a squeeze. Neither of them could come up with anything to say. So Lilith waved goodbye and headed home, and the rest of the Cyclops crew was not far behind. Along with the empty, not much worse for the wear Cyclops, Charlene mixed herself up a vodka tonic and waited to see if Jake the DJ would remember to pick her up. He didn't. Charlene called a cab and headed home around 3, leaving the last of the scattered peanuts for the morning crew to sweep up. Oh, I have 2 listeners. Hello, listeners. If you like what you're hearing, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to say, right? I watch the other YouTube people. They say like and subscribe. You guys still there? I would love a comment just to know where you're listening from. That's what I'm always curious about. And maybe why you're listening. But I will continue with Albrecht Drue, Ghostpuncher, Chapter 7. He walked, cloaked in a blue razor vortex of invectives and incoherence, aimless and looking to incite. What he wanted to incite, he didn't know and he didn't care. All he knew that he was tired, the fun part of his booze had worn off, and all he cared about was not going home. He walked through streets devoid of light, unpopulated, vacant but for the rats and the dogs and the forgotten men who had no shelter from the rain that came down like pine needles in a wildfire. The sudden cold dug into him, clattered his jaws, stung his nose, clung to him like unfinished sex. It had been hours since Al lost track of the wino, or even recognized the streets through which he stumbled, almost as long as he'd had to shove past another body or had some sleep-interrupted citizen shout at him from the slammed-open window. The farther away from the Cyclops he got, the darker the night grew, the harder the rain and the recrimination fell. Townhouses and boutique storefronts gave way to tenements and boarded windows. Cramped, overgrown lots teemed with coyotes and carrion feeders, and shadows found deeper places to hide from whatever moonlight dared ventured earthward. Dimly, distracted by the fact he'd been kicking the crap out of a stray garbage can for the last few minutes, Al realized he's just crossed Martin Luther King Boulevard. Just to be sure, he checked himself. He hadn't been shot yet. Jennings Heights crowded all around him, one condemned building holding up the next, all of them waiting for the rogue gust of wind that would bring the whole ghetto down. Cars hunkered in the downpour, rusting and abandoned where they'd been stopped years or maybe minutes before. Some of them had people inside, others maybe corpses. Al didn't look too closely. A skinny, destitute hooker spied him from a doorway, offering her wretched wares with a series of gestures more ridiculous than seductive. Al did not acknowledge her, but saw her give him the finger as he trudged past. She disappeared an instant later. Al knew she'd gone off to tell somebody who she'd seen wandering around the hood. He didn't belong here, and the locals would have no qualms about reminding him of that. He had to get out of here, but the storm had grown into a deluge, getting stronger every second. He'd meant to lose himself tonight, and he had. Hours of turning down random alleys and blindly loping off anything that caught his eye had stolen all sense of space and direction from him. There was no way he could find himself back home in the dark. He'd be lucky if he could get out of Jennings Heights without getting rolled. If it weren't for the rain, whoever the hooker had run off to tell him about likely would have already done the honors. But little rain never dissuaded the pimp for long. The thought did a fine job of sobering Al up, and he began to move a little faster. He needed to get off the street, out of sight, and find a place to hide. Al ducked down an alley, desperate to elude whoever was or wasn't chasing him. The general slanting dilapidation of the building offered a little cover from the rain, and Al found he wasn't the only one taking advantage. "Hello, children," Al said, like Chef from South Park, waving to the three kids huddled beside an overflowing dumpster. He couldn't tell if they were boys or girls, thanks to the deplorable state of their clothes and hygiene, but they were short, probably not yet teenagers, which was a good thing because the only thing worse than adults were teenagers and preschoolers. They might have been midgets. Don't mind me, just trying to get away from an army of killer pimps. One of the kids, gaunt and overburdened by a green parka 5 sizes too big, shrugged. Based on the voice, Al guessed a boy, probably not a midget. Ain't no pimps around here. The other two, smaller still and dressed in rags, envied being a coat 5 sizes too big, had their hoods drawn low. They chittered among themselves, keeping the relatively big one's shadow over them. "Then who protects the hookers?" Al said. He found a dryish spot and sat down, bringing him to just below the speaker's eye level. The kid laughed a grimy, gutty laugh. "Ain't you know Heights girls don't need no protection? It's like Sin City up in this bitch in the 70s, man." Whatever shelter the wet alley coughed up did nothing to stem the chill. Sitting had been a bad idea. The physical exertion that kept his blood circulating also served more or less to keep the alcohol in check, and now that he'd stopped, the world began to spin and lose cohesion. Bloodthirsty pimps or not, he needed to get somewhere that he could crash. The other end of the alley opened into a wide thoroughfare, across which stood the burned-out remains of what Al assumed had been a fine hotel. At one point, it'd do at least until the rain stops. Yeah, any goddamn port in the storm, huh? "Shit, man," the bigger kid said. His companions had fanned out behind him, scuttling on all fours, effectively blocking either end of the alley. If Al hadn't known better, he'd thought the little bastards were purposely flanking him. Been all sorts of crazy for the Heights since the 70s. "Blame it on disco," Al said. He hauled himself up the wall behind him, or at least tried to, but discovered abruptly his legs weren't working. The kids were drawing closer, something like ragged hisses fogging the air in front of their faces. "What happened to your face, man?" the big one said. He hadn't moved since he'd stood up. In fact, he seemed to have planted himself directly in front of his new friend, his stance solid, not all in line with the casual manner he affected. "Looks like somebody got his ass kicked." Al felt dizzy, not just from the liquor. There was something wrong with this kid, and the way he just stood there with his minions slithering around him. That's when Al finally got a good look at him. They'd gotten within arm's reach, grown silent. Underneath the hoods, their eyes, cave black marbles set in shadow, seemed to cast a faint darkness. Their mouths were lipless slits, their noses sharp, bone, without nostrils. The hell kind of crack you little bastard's been smoking? Al said, struggling up to find his feet. Too late, he managed to drag himself halfway up the wall. The kids were on like dogs on a bleeding puppy, ripping with fingernails like talons, snarling, snapping, biting. You don't belong here, man, the big one said. He still didn't move, but a slow smile stretched across his ashen face. I'm guessing you don't either, you demonic little cunt. Al kicked at the kids, sending one flying against the far side of the alley. It hit hard, then slammed into the concrete, but was on its feet and charging as soon as it did. All right, enough of this happy horse shit, Al said. I'm cold, I'm drunk, and I ain't in the mood to get murdered by a bunch of prepubescent thralls of Satan. If there was one thing that Al could do, even when he was drunk, tired, and not in the mood, it was screw. If there was another thing he could do, it was fight. He grabbed the second kid by the neck with his left hand and brought its head up and slammed the first one under its jaw. His right fist wrapped itself around the kid's ankles, and he swung the little bastard's body like a bat, smashing the first kid back into the wall. This time it didn't get up. Taking one ankle in each hand, Al bashed his impromptu hammer again against the ground until it stopped squirming. He hoped to God this was a dream and not just a hallucination, because there was no damn way it could be real. And he didn't want to sober up to the body of two dead, non-possessed kids. You're an asshole, man, the big one said. His smile had faded away. It almost looked like he was going to cry. My sisters were hungry and all, and you had to go smash them up like that? Fuck you, jerk. Well, I'm a lot of things, but I ain't dinner. Shit, I ain't even fourth meal. Al stepped forward, hefting the gory, pulpy meat sack by its legs and bringing it down as hard as he could on the big one's skull. What he got for his efforts was a shower of milky green goo as the body exploded. The big one didn't budge. Al's fingers went numb, dropped what was left of the kid thing. He should have run, but he found himself rooted in place. The big kid shook off his too big coat, revealing two more miniature black-eyed delinquents standing on each other's shoulders like they were trying to sneak into an R-rated movie. The taller one, the talker, tore off his fake nose. Demons, Al said. I'm about to get eaten by demon midgets. You've got to be shitting me. With a spastic shriek, the three of them bolted at Al, but did the only thing he could do just then. He pissed himself and ran the fuck away. Newfound energy surged through him, and Al sprinted towards the far end of the alley, kicking trash cans over, vaulting debris, doing anything he could do to slow his pursuers. Nothing helped. They were on him like pasties on pasties on nipples at a Virginia strip club. He burst into the deserted streets, instantly slipping on wet asphalt and crashing to his knees. One of the things nipped his ass, and Al kicked back hard. On his hands and knees, he pulled himself across the tarmac, waiting to be overtaken and devoured, but not quite ready to give up. Thank God for the universal fellowship of the drunk. Whether they knew it or not, every alcoholic, binge drinker, and wino was a member, and half the shit they did when they were wasted was subliminal groundwork laid down for a fellow's future use. So if you see some waffle-faced pisher carelessly toss a bottle out of his bin or car window, just leave it alone. Odds are, like everything else, he's dumping it for a specific purpose. Al's hand closed over a discarded MD 2020 bottle and then smashed it into a functional enough shank. He rolled over onto his back, raising his blade. Great fucking Christmas. Al said, his words redolent with breathy disbelief. I'm going to be eaten by a demonic midget Voltron. Three demons two, had been joined by the two Al had done his best to fuck up beyond repair, and they were indeed pulling a Voltron on him. Flesh separated from bones that cracked and splintered, twisting into a hideous caricature of limbs. The scraps of skin and muscle wriggled like worms in the light socket, braided themselves together with a sickening, sucking slosh. Al sat there, watching like a dumbass as the thing became not five vicious, diminutive demon buffeters, but a single titanic monster with gaping, dagger-found mouths for hands and feet, and a leering, featureless maw where its head should have been. It would have looked pretty badass if Al hadn't known it was most likely going to end up inside of it in the next few minutes, and not in the way he'd always figured, imagined himself inside Voltron either. Running hadn't quite worked out so far, but Al compared his broken bottle to the thousands of snapping teeth pointed his way and decided to give running another go. Body screaming, he shot away from the monster, aiming himself at the hotel he'd seen from the alley. He never really cared how much long he was going to live, but in this particular instant, he wanted as many more seconds as he could get. Oh man, there's nobody out there. A tall wrought iron fence. I'm watching. Zero people watching. Oh no, where's everybody? I don't care. I'll continue onward. I want to find out what's going to happen. I hope you do too. A tall wrought iron fence separated the derelict hotel from the sidewalk, but Al parkoured right the hell over it, not bothering to remind himself he didn't know how to spell parkour, let alone demonstrate it. He hit the ground hard and his knees gave out. Well, said Al, panting and dazed. That's me done. Kind of wish I'd smoked more. Al laid back on the concrete, rain washing over him. He dug a lucky out of his jacket, careful to keep it from getting wet, and managed to find his lighter. He lit it up, drew it in, let out a long plume of cottony gray smoke. He wondered if, when he boarded the Universal locomotive, his ticket had read, "Last stop, eaten by demonic midget Voltron after pissing himself in an alley in Jennings Heights." He closed his eyes and gave in to what was coming next. That turned out to be not a damn thing. Half a minute of lying in the rain, not seen half a minute of lying in the rain, having not seen him taking the long dirt nap. He sat up. The demon was gone, vanished. He sat alone in front of the hotel, soaked, in a rather exorbitant amount of pain, but so far uneaten and thoroughly unmurdered. Actually, he wasn't quite alone. Squatting in the once opulent doorway of the gutted hotel, an old Filipino lady ate cat food straight out of the can. She watched Al with calm eyes, apparently scooping her meal into cracked, chapped lattice lips. Apparently discomfited by staring, she held the can out in a hospitable gesture and motioned him over. Al declined the snack, but accepted the invitation, limped out of the rain to share her shelter. Oh, oh man, why are you putting Bible God stuff here? This is all about demons and drinking. I mean, sure, why not? I'm not gonna complain. Any old port in the storm. Um, I don't know what the Bible says about ghost punching, but I'd be curious to know. Hit that like button. The doors, the glass long shattered, were bronze portals looking into an inky void. It was weird that nobody had bothered to even hang up plywood to keep the animals and bums out. It's also weird just how tidy things were, without a speck of graffiti or a chunk of windblown rubbish. The old lady shrugged, kept on eating. Sal started inside, body and mind just about the limit. She grabbed him by the wrist. With more strength than her apparent frailty would have suggested. "That's a bad place, kid," the old lady said. She was calm, free of the normal tics and visible madness he expected. Her only affectation seemed to be punctuating her sentences with bites of fancy feast. "Stay out here. Warm enough out here and food tonight. Rain's bad, but not that bad. Better here." "Did you see what happened?" Al said. "Saw you jump the fence. Saw you smoke a cigarette. You got another cigarette? I'd like one of your cigarettes." I'll give her one. He flicked open his Zippo, but the old lady shied away from the flame. She tucked the Lucky into the tangled mess of thick black hair and swept her fingers along the inside of her empty can, sopping up every last drop of cat food juice. "I give the cigarette later to the man. The man gives me food, sometimes cat food, sometimes leftovers. His wife won't let him buy his own. So when I get one, I give it to the man. He gives me food. I keep a secret smoking from his wife. It's bad to lie because we're both daughters of someone, but she's a bitch for not letting the man smoke, so it's okay." The storm wasn't lessening. Al didn't even know if it could be called a storm. There's no lightning, no thunder. It's just a wind, a constant, ceaseless downpour, like someone left the shower on and hot water was long ago run out. He wobbled onto his feet, very much aware that he didn't crash soon. He was going to topple over where he stood. There was warmth inside, he knew, and regardless of the old lady, he was going to find it. "Don't go into the nest," I said. The old lady said. "The snake is in the nest." "Sweetheart," Al said, "after what I've been through, I'll eat a fucking snake if it means I can get a little sleep." "Bad language," the old lady said. She let go of Al's wrist and wiped her hand on her clothes. "Eat the snake, then. You eat the snake. I'll move into the nest. Maybe find the stash I left in there. Probably broken now. Everything is broken in the nest, but not the snake." For the first time, Al noticed the old lady wasn't sitting there at all. Her legs had been removed at mid-thigh. Al wondered how she managed to get around, but the pile of empty cans and burgeoning awareness of a vengefully foul odor told him that he probably didn't. She probably didn't. He tossed the remainder of his pack of Luckies into her lap and left her for the warmth he could feel emanating from inside the hulk that had once been a place where people found shelter when they were far from home. That's the thing about hotels, or hostels, or inns, whatever else they might be, from the shittiest roach coach to the grandest Budapest, they offered haven to the homesick and the weary. People didn't live in them, but they let their guard down almost as if they did. They fucked and killed and slept beside each other with a communal anonymity that lingered long after they left, never giving much thought to who'd been there before or why, or who would be there next. They were ports in a storm where anyone with a few bits could find shelter, but where the only the saddest among them could stay longer than they had to. Check in, check out, on to the next. "Sure thing, darling," Hal said as he went inside. The old lady watched him disappear into the inner darkness, counted the long smokes, 5 long smokes in the white box. "Should have told him about the ghosts," she said. And that concludes verse 7 of chapter 2 of Albrecht Drue, Ghostpuncher. I hope some of you enjoyed it. And if some of you didn't, well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, because life's too short not to live it up a bit.